Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. Yes, we're later than usual because of the breaking news that came out in the middle of the night about Kathleen Kennedy reportedly planning to step down from Lucasfilm at the end of the year or sometime during 2025. If you haven't seen that story, you can check that out right now on the channel. And that's just the life of a YouTuber. 1 minute, you're planning this week's episode of Box Office Reporting. The next, you're scrambling to get out a story at the last minute in the morning and see how it performs. But we do have some box office news to cover, including Captain America Brave New World's second weekend domestically, as well as the debut of The Monkey. So let's jump right into it with the second weekend of Captain America Brave New World, which dropped 68.3% for a $28.1 million second weekend. Its total now is $141.1 million, and I'm going to break down that number a lot in just a couple minutes. The Monkey debuted in second place at just over $14 million. That's the second best debut ever for Neon, behind Osgood Perkins' other film, Longlegs, which opened last year. And we're going to look at the overall state of Neon in a few minutes. Paddington in Peru dropped 49% in its second weekend to bring in another $6.5 million for a domestic total eclipsing $25 million so far. Dogman stays in the top 5. It dropped 40.1% with a $5.8 million weekend and a $78.7 million domestic total. Depending on who you ask, Ne Zha 2 is in fifth place with $3 million and a domestic total of $14.8 million, staying in the top 5, a 58.3% drop. But the reporting for Ne Zha and also for Chava, which is a film from India in the top 10, has been all over the place. I check 4 or 5 different sources for box office results every week, and almost every one of them had a different number. So you may see it listed differently elsewhere. I just had to kind of make a judgment call and see what the consensus was, and it was that Ne Zha remains in the top 5 in its second weekend domestically. In sixth place was Heart Eyes, which saw a steep 72.7% drop. Obviously, a lot of its business was tied to Valentine's Day. It made $2.7 million. Mufasa the Lion King spends a 10th week in the domestic top 10 with another $2.5 million. Its domestic total now at $245.4 million. In eighth place from Lionsgate is Zachary Levi's inspirational film, The Unbreakable Boy. I assume it's inspirational. I haven't seen it. It brought in $2.3 million. Chava comes in ninth place with a 6.1% drop, according to the numbers that I'm going with a $1.6 million total and a domestic total of $4.8 million. And One of Them Days spends a sixth week in the top 10. It dropped 53.5%, brought in another $1.3 million, and now has a $45.9 million domestic total. Dropping out of the top 10 were 2 movies, Companion, which was in the top 10 for 3 weeks, and Love Hurts, which is out of the top 10 after just 2 weeks. And looking at the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend, Love Hurts leads the charge with 636 theaters lost. Not a big weekend as far as turnover. It's still in 2,419. Flight Risk lost 546 theaters. It's now out of wide release in 868. Companion, I feel like, got really screwed over by Captain America Brave New World coming over because it lost 399 theaters and it's already out of wide release. It's in 663 theaters. I think that movie was out of theaters way too quickly for word of mouth to build. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 loses 342 theaters. It's now in 591. And Mufasa the Lion King lost 315 theaters, but it's still in pretty wide release. It's in 1,925 theaters. This is what I like to call our road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the average from 2021 to 2024. And that dotted black line is every weekend this year. And after a nice spike, which saw us much closer to the blue line than the red line, we drop a lot closer to the post-pandemic baseline that we've been seeing. So Captain America Brave New World did provide a 1-week boost at the box office, but it was not to last as we dipped significantly down the following weekend. So let's talk a little bit about Captain America Brave New World. And the title for last week's show, I called it a mediocre box office opening. And boy, did I hear about it from a lot of you. You did not agree with my assessment of it. However, and I also included reviews in that title, I do think that it was a somewhat mediocre opening. And it certainly wasn't helped by the fact that it had the third worst drop-off for any MCU film ever from weekend number 1 to weekend number 2. The worst is still The Marvels at 78.1%, then Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania at 69.9%, and then we have Captain America Brave New World, which dropped off 68.3%. That's a bigger drop off than we saw for Black Widow and Thor Love and Thunder, which are the next 2 biggest films as far as MCU drop-offs in weekend number 2. And as you can see from this chart, since 2020, only Deadpool and Wolverine, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 have had a drop-off of less than 62.3%. That's basically the Eternals line there. So this is really the new norm for the MCU. Big drop-offs in weekend 2, and in some cases, either disappointing or, yes, I still contend, mediocre openings. And some people said, well, it's not fair. You can't compare it to other MCU films. You should compare them to Phase 1 movies. I get it. I understand that people are going to have different thoughts, but I think that the results from this past weekend bear out that this is not a particularly successful film at the box office. I'm not saying that it's a massive flop. All I'm saying is that it is not a huge hit either. When we look at Brave New World as far as the franchise tracker for the MCU, it's currently at number 33 out of 35. It's now past the Marvels and the Incredible Hulk. The next 2 movies that it would pass would be Eternals and Captain America: The First Avenger. If it can get to $200 million, it would be in Thor: The Dark World territory, right around number 27 for the MCU. And when we look at the MCU as far as inflation-adjusted gross, Captain America: Brave New World is at number 34. It's still ahead of the Marvels, but it is tracking a bit behind Eternals, which made $182 million adjusted for inflation. The Incredible Hulk is next with $187.3 million, then Black Widow at just over $200 million, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania at $214.5 million. And to sort of back up my thoughts on Captain America: Brave New World, I did one of my profitability estimates. I know that I haven't done one for a while, but I like to break it down, especially when people are maybe a little in a gray area about how a movie is doing theatrically. So this is my current profit breakdown for Brave New World. Right now, it's made $13.5 million in China, as has been the trend lately. Hollywood movies not doing a whole lot of business in China, which brings $2.7 million back to investors after you get 20% back from the Chinese market. A 40% cut of the movie's international gross at $134.8 million, that's minus China, comes into about $53.9 million. Then I'm estimating a 60% share from the movie's opening week, which brought in $113 million. That's $67.8 million back to investors. And then a 55% share so far of the second week, so that's $16.9 million of the $28.1 million Brave New World made in its second weekend. The budget is reported at $180 million. A lot of people say that they think it's a lot higher due to reshoots, but I'm going to go with the reported number. The marketing budget I'm putting at about $100 million. That's standard. Again, could be higher, but that's sort of the baseline number when I don't have another number to reference. So that puts costs for Captain America: Brave New World at about $280 million. Right now, its worldwide gross is at $289.5 million. Out of that, I'm estimating a net back to the studio and investors at $141.3 million. When you subtract the costs for making the movie, that puts Captain America: Brave New World at a current theatrical shortfall of $138.6 million. Now, it is going to continue to make money and close that gap, but as I've said many times here on the show, the goal here at a minimum is to break even in the theatrical window, because that frees up a lot of avenues for profit from the other ancillary revenue streams. Given its current shortfall, given its trajectory both at the domestic and the international box office, I think it is doubtful that Captain America: Brave New World is going to be able to do that. Again, it's not going to be a massive failure for Disney and Marvel, but I do think that it's going to be yet another example of what you might have expected to be a breakout hit, especially with stars like Harrison Ford attached, with the Red Hulk forward marketing, with the Captain America brand, with the Marvel brand, and yet they're still struggling to break even in the theatrical marketplace. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. A word for that very well could be mediocre. On last week's show, I ran a member poll asking if you believe that Captain America: Brave New World would beat the unadjusted domestic total of Captain America: The First Avenger, which is $176.6 million. 59% of you said that you believe yes, that it will, and I think that that's not a bad bet. 41% of you said no, and again, I think that shows a lack of confidence in the long-term success of this film. So there's still quite a lot to be written about Captain America: Brave New World. The story is not yet over, but I do take a little bit of umbrage at people saying that I was clickbaiting with my show last week, because I think I laid out my case pretty well, and I continue to lay it out. And trust me, if I wanted to clickbait, I would certainly not start now. It is not exactly lucrative to be the guy asking for reasonable takes on YouTube. This channel could be a lot bigger if I decided to go clickbait and rage bait, but I specifically structure my shows to not do that. So, maybe just hear me out before jumping down my throat about a title. Let's turn now to this week's Charts with Dan trivia question, and it concerns the star of Captain America Brave New World, Anthony Mackie. We know that he's been in several incredibly successful films inside of the MCU, but my question is, what are Anthony Mackie's highest grossing non-MCU films, both domestic and worldwide? They could be the same movie. They could be two different movies. I'll give you a second to think it over. And here we come with the answer. Anthony Mackie's highest grossing non-MCU film domestically is 8 Mile, which made $116.7 million. And worldwide, his highest grossing non-MCU film is Real Steel. Remember that movie? It made just under $300 million and marks Mackie's high water mark, not as part of the Marvel Universe. Captain America Brave New World wasn't the only movie in release. This was also a big weekend for The Monkey, which is the latest release from Neon and director Osgood Perkins. And it wasn't just the second best opening in the history of Neon. The Monkey is already one of Neon's top 10 grossers ever domestically. It's currently at number 7, ahead of Three Identical Strangers, Apollo 11, and Spencer. And it's closing the gap quickly on Anora, which is at number 6. Anora is itself about to overtake Immaculate in the top 5, although it doesn't look like it's going to actually make that top 5. The top 4 remain the same, with Ferrari at number 4, I, Tonya at number 3, Parasite at number 2, and Osgood Perkins' Long Legs with a healthy lead in number 1 at $74.3 million. Believe it or not, we're almost already at the end of another month in 2025, which means it's time to look at an updated cumulative box office for the year. Remember, the goal of the industry and many theater owners is to see a substantial improvement on the box office results that we saw in 2024. And through almost the end of February, we are seeing an improvement, although it's anyone's guess as to how substantial that might be. With 4 days left to go, the box office for 2025 so far has made $986.4 million. That's over $100 million higher than we were at this point last year in 2024. So that's good news. And I think with those last 4 days added, that we're going to get over $1 billion for February's gross, although I think we're also still going to lag behind where we were in 2023. So I think it's kind of good news, bad news. The good news is, yes, we are seeing an improvement on 2024's box office. The bad news is it hasn't exactly been a drastic improvement, which is what I think a lot of theater owners and a lot of the studios are looking for. Let's also look at the updated market share so far in 2025. Disney and Universal continue to dominate the theatrical marketplace this year. Disney has 36.27% of all tickets sold since January 1st. Universal's at 20.58%. The third biggest slice actually goes to all other studios at 11.98%. Sony is at 11.96%. Paramount is at 9.72%. Lionsgate is at 6.85%. And basically sitting out the year so far are Warner Brothers with just over 2% and Amazon MGM with about half a percentage point. The Academy Awards are this Sunday, and there are still several Best Picture contenders that are currently playing in theaters, although all of them are in limited release or under 1,000 theaters. The biggest grosser for the past week was A Complete Unknown, which brought in about $807,000 in 730 theaters. I'm Still Here brought in about $450,000. It's in its widest release so far in 762 theaters. The Brutalist brought in $350,000. It's playing in 500 theaters. Wicked brought in another $200,000. It's currently playing in 482 theaters. Nickel Boys saw an increase in business of 35%. It brought in $137,000. It's in 125 theaters. Anora has had a re-release and expansion, as many of these movies did in the last weekend before the Oscars. It's in 408 theaters and saw a 75% increase in business to just over $100,000. Conclave is still in 443 theaters. It was brought back out for the Oscars. It made around $76,000, which is a 155% increase in business from the previous weekend. And The Substance was also brought back to theaters. It's currently in 346 of them. It brought in just over $60,000, which is a 169% increase. And my member poll question for this week is a very simple one. What will win Best Picture at the Oscars on Sunday? Now, I've narrowed it down to the three, what I think are consensus frontrunners: Anora, Conclave, and The Brutalist. But the fourth option is Other. So if you think that Wicked or A Complete Unknown or I'm Still Here is going to pull off an upset, then you can vote for Other as your chosen Best Picture winner. And if you want to vote in these member polls and you're not yet a member of the channel, you can join. There may be a button for you to join depending on how you're watching this episode, or there's definitely a link down in the description below. I would love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are and to see if your prediction for Best Picture comes true for the Oscars on Sunday. I am still formulating my own personal Oscar picks, but they will be announced here on the channel later this week. We have so many more numbers to break down, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this week's show. This episode's brought to you by Bird Dogs. When you think about dress pants, you probably think about the same things I do. Stiff, scratchy material and an uncomfortable fit that leaves you desperate to change into anything else as soon as you get home. But allow me to introduce you to the dress pants you'll want to wear all day with Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs makes pants that don't just look good for any occasion, they're comfortable enough to wear anytime you want. I went to a semi-formal gathering last week where I felt like I needed to dress up a little bit, and I wore Bird Dog pants for the first time and was surprised, not just at how comfortable I was, but by the fact that I wore the pants for the rest of the day. They're super stretchy and soft with a built-in liner that offers fit and comfort, and they also fit well because I could choose my own custom waist and length, and that's big for me as someone who's often between standard sizes. I'd absolutely recommend these pants if you're looking for a great pair of dress pants or pants you can wear whenever you want. Plus, if you use my code Dan right now at birddogs.com, you're going to get a free hat, and you know I love hats. Also, Bird Dogs doesn't just make pants and shorts, they also have things like the classic quarter zip, which is also really soft and comes with its own built-in liner. It's a great item to add to my wardrobe as we begin the transition into spring, and jackets aren't always the best option. And don't forget, for a limited time, our listeners get a free hat with any order when you use code Dan at birddogs.com. Get their best-selling hat completely free when you use code Dan at birddogs.com. And when you order, make sure to support the show and tell them that I sent you. Let's take a look now at the results from outside the North American market. That would be the US and Canada. These are the top 5 films internationally. Ne Zha 2 remains number 1 at $153.5 million, a phenomenal run that continues to dominate the international market. Captain America Brave New World brought in $35.3 million internationally. Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy, continues to be a draw outside of North America and the US, where it is a streaming release. It brought in $20.9 million. Chava brought in $16.3 million, and Detective Chinatown 1900 rounds out the top 5 with $11.8 million. When you take the international numbers and combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 5 films worldwide. Ne Zha 2 drops 44% with $156.6 million. Its worldwide total now almost $1.8 billion. Captain America Brave New World had a bit of a softer landing worldwide, but still pretty steep, 64.9% drop off from the previous weekend. It brought in $63.5 million. Its worldwide total now at $289.4 million. Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy, dropped 36.1%. Its worldwide total is now at $72.6 million. The Monkey opened to $20.8 million, and Chava had a 6.7% decrease in business, again, depending on which domestic numbers you're looking at, for a $17.8 million weekend and a worldwide total of just over $54 million. And Ne Zha 2, as I talked about last week, is now one of the top 10 moneymakers of all time worldwide. It bumps 2019's The Lion King off the list and has also passed Jurassic World and Inside Out 2. The next movie, should it get to $1.95 billion, is Spider-Man No Way Home. And then if it gets to $2 billion, it could very well be after Avengers Infinity War and Star Wars The Force Awakens. I talked extensively in last week's show about the numbers for Ne Zha 2 and the fact that some people say that they can't be relied upon. I laid out my argument about why I think that they can be, or at least that they're not fraudulent numbers, and some people still came into the comments and said that they don't believe that the numbers are real, and that's fine. I will say that a few times I did ask for sources because I did genuinely want to look into it myself, and what I usually got back were conspiracy theories from another YouTuber, or just Google it, which brought up results that weren't really applicable to the story. One response that I got said, well, I just typed it into ChatGPT and it told me that it wasn't reliable, which again, that's not exactly a source. The closest thing that I could find, and I do actually look into these things, I don't just say that I do, is a report from one specific YouTube outlet that is very critical of China generally, that alleged that it was fake because Chinese schools were taking kids on field trips to go see the movie, which again, yes, that's going to boost the gross, but I don't necessarily think that's a sign of fraud. I think that's a sign that this is a hit movie that schools decided to take their kids to. Yes, the Chinese film industry is used by the ruling party in China as a sign of strength. That doesn't mean it's fake. It just means that it is turned into sort of a point of Chinese national pride. So anyway, Ne Zha 2, now one of the 10 highest grossing films worldwide of all time. Let's look at where Captain America Brave New World falls as far as the worldwide grosses of the MCU. Currently, it's at number 33, ahead of The Incredible Hulk and The Marvels. $370.5 million is the next milestone. That means that it would pass the first Captain America film, Captain America the First Avenger. Then if it can get to around $400 million, it'll be right around where The Eternals came in. Let's take a look now at what I call our specialty charts here at the domestic box office, and we'll start with the per theater averages for the past weekend. At number 1 is a film called Ex-Husbands, which played in one theater. It's a film from director Noah Pritzker about a father, his 2 sons, and their evolving relationships. It actually began hitting the festival circuit back in 2023. Captain America Brave New World comes in second place, bringing in $6,862 per theater, and it's over 4,100 theaters. Jean-Luc Godard's A Woman is a Woman, playing in one theater, brings in $5,636 in that theater. The Monkey comes in fourth place, bringing in $4,380 per theater in 3,200 theaters. And Chava holds down that fifth spot, bringing in $4,310 per theater in 390 theaters. Looking at the top releases in limited release, that's 1,000 theaters or fewer. At number 1 is Ne Zha 2, which I have at just over $3 million, followed by Chava, bringing in $1.6 million. The 2025 Oscar shorts come in third place at just under $700,000. If you're looking to catch all the shorts, the only way really before the Academy Awards to see them, if you're in the US, is to find a screening of the Oscar-nominated short film, so hopefully there's one near you. In fourth place is Dragon, a Tamil language film from India about a man who seeks his fortune through financial fraud. And coming in fifth place in 762 theaters is I'm Still Here, which brings in just over $450,000. Looking at the 2025 annual domestic box office, these are movies released in 2025. Captain America Brave New World is, of course, number 1 at $141.1 million. Dogman is in second place at $78.7 million, followed by One of Them Days in third place, Den of Thieves 2, Pantera in fourth, Flight Risk in fifth, and Hard Eyes in sixth. Paddington in Peru moves up 2 spots to number 7, with Wolfman moving down to number 8, Companion moving down to number 9, and Love Hurts moving down to number 10. When you look at all movie tickets sold this year, Captain America Brave New World displaces Mufasa the Lion King as the number 1 ticket seller of 2025. Mufasa the Lion King moves down to number 2, having made $117.2 million since January 1st. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is in third place, followed by Dogman in fourth, Moana 2 in fifth, Nosferatu in sixth, One of Them Days in seventh, A Complete Unknown in eighth, Wicked in ninth, and Den of Thieves 2 Pantera in 10th place. And that's everything I've got for the world of the box office this week. Let's turn now to the world of streaming, and we'll start with the latest numbers that we have from Netflix. This covers global numbers for the week of February 10th through the 16th, and the number 1 program on Netflix was a movie called La Dolce Villa, which is a rom-com starring Scott Foley about a dad who travels to Italy and finds love. It brought in 19.82 million views. That's ahead of Kinda Pregnant, which is bumped down to second place, bringing in 13.68 million views. And third place is a new movie, Honeymoon Crasher. It's a French film about a guy who gets left at the altar and takes what would have been his honeymoon trip with his mother. The Orr Murders, and I believe that's correct. I got a Swedish pronunciation lesson, as I often do here on the show. Brought in 10.65 million views in fourth place. In fifth place is the debut of Cassandra, a German series about a robot home assistant run amok. In sixth place is Aftermath, which is not a Netflix original film, but is a 2024 film starring Dylan Sprouse about a veteran trapped on a bridge with his sister during a terrorist attack. In seventh place is Surviving Black Hawk Down, a docuseries featuring some of the real soldiers involved in the Black Hawk Down incident in Mogadishu. At number 8 and 9 are Shrek and Shrek 2, always a big draw on streaming. And finally coming in at number 10 with 5.85 million views is the 6th season of Cobra Kai, which did eventually wrap up. It was competing with Attack on Titan for most protracted finale. Those numbers are low because there are lots of episodes in this 6th season, so it's divided out over the runtime of the entire season, but still, it was enough to make the top 10. And when we look at the most watched Netflix programs in 2025 so far, Back in Action is at number 1 with 126.8 million views, followed by Squid Game Season 2 with 122.3 million views. Ad Vitam is at number 3, followed by Missing You and The Secret Life of Pets. The Night Agent Season 2 is at number 6 with just over 41 million views. Kinda Pregnant debuts on the list with 38.81 million views so far this year. That bumps American Primeval down to number 8, Carry On down to number 9, and Squid Game Season 1 down to number 10. XO Kitty Season 2 falls off the list of the most watched programs of the year so far. Let's take a look now at the Nielsen numbers. Now, unlike Netflix's numbers, these are domestic only, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to put this data out. So this covers the week of January 20th through the 26th, and these were the 10 most watched streaming movies. At number 1 was Back in Action in its second week at 23.3 million hours watched, followed by the debut of You Gotta Believe on Netflix, which is not an original film, but was a movie that came out last year. It brought in 5.5 million hours watched. The Wild Robot on Peacock debuts at number 3 with 5.4 million hours watched. Then we have some holdovers, including Despicable Me 2 at number 4, Moana at number 5, the first Despicable Me at number 6, and Unstoppable at number 7. The original film Star Trek Section 31 on Paramount Plus does make the top 10, but it didn't move the needle a whole lot. It brought in 2.8 million hours watched. Frozen on Disney Plus brought in just about the same amount of watch time, 2.8 million hours watched at number 9. And Dune Part 2 comes in at number 10, available on both Max and Netflix with 2.55 million hours watched. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for January 20th through 26th, at number 1 was the debut of the new season of The Night Agent with 51.8 million hours watched. That's the second best number we've seen this year, behind the numbers that came in for Squid Game. Younger comes in at number 2 with 23.1 million hours watched, followed by Bluey, Bob's Burgers, and Grey's Anatomy. Squid Game drops to number 6 with 13.7 million hours watched, followed by Dexter at number 7. The Rookie on Hulu debuts on the charts with 12.4 million hours watched. American Primeval is at number 9, and Family Guy is at number 10. When we look at the top shows as far as watch time per available episode, The Night Agent is also number 1 here at 2.59 million hours watched per episode. American Primeval comes in second at 1.98 million hours watched per episode. Then we have Landman at just over 1 million hours watched per episode. Beast Games comes in number 4 at 985,000 hours watched per episode, just ahead of Severance, which is bringing in its strongest numbers by far on the Nielsen charts with 942,000 hours watched per episode. Squid Game is at number 6, followed by On Call at number 7, XO Kitty at number 8, Younger at number 9, and The Traitors rounding out the top 10 with just under 250,000 hours watched per episode. It's a little early to start breaking down the most watched programs of the year on Nielsen as far as movies, original series, and library series, but I can show you what the 10 most watched programs overall, library, original, or movie, are so far in 2025. Squid Game leads the way with 150.6 million hours watched through the first month of 2025, followed by Bluey at 79 million hours watched. Then we have Landman at 72.6 million hours watched, Bob's Burgers at 61.3 million hours watched, Grey's Anatomy at 59.75 million hours watched, American Primeval at number 6 with 56.3 million hours, Dexter in 7th place at 54.2 million hours, Virgin River in 8th place at 51.85 million hours, The Night Agent debuting in 9th place at 51.83 million hours, and Back in Action, the only movie on this chart. It's impressive for a movie to make the top 10 given that it's up against all kinds of other series. It comes in at 48.9 million hours. And that pretty much wraps us up for this week. Before we go, I want to take a look at some options on streaming and in theaters that might interest you in the week ahead. It's a pretty light week. First of all, starting today on Netflix, you can catch Venom: The Last Dance streaming. It's part of Sony's overall deal to bring its films to Netflix first. Then on Thursday, also debuting on Netflix, is Running Point. Kate Hudson plays the new head of her family's basketball team with a supporting cast that includes Brenda Song, Max Greenfield, and Chet Hanks. On Friday, Last Breath opens in theaters nationwide. It stars Woody Harrelson, Simu Liu, and Cliff Curtis in a story about deep-sea divers trying to rescue another diver who's trapped underwater. It's based on a true story. Also opening nationwide in theaters is My Dead Friend Zoe. Sonequa Martin Green plays a combat veteran who still sees her best friend Zoe, played by Natalie Morales, who, as you might have guessed from the title, is dead. Morgan Freeman and Ed Harris co-star, and the movie has very strong reviews thus far. If you're an Ed Harris fan, you're in luck because he has another film coming out in limited release called Riff Raff. He plays a former criminal whose old associates come looking for him. The movie co-stars Jennifer Coolidge, Bill Murray, Pete Davidson, and Gabrielle Union. And opening in some theaters around the country this weekend is Mobile Suit Gundam GQUUUUUX beginning. I'm not even going to try to start figuring out how to pronounce that. It's reportedly the 16th part of the Gundam franchise, and it's an edited version of some episodes of an upcoming anime series. Finally, on Sunday, of course, we have the Academy Awards, which are being broadcast on ABC and for the first time are also being broadcast live via streaming. They're available if you are a Hulu subscriber. Of course, that's where I'm going to be on Sunday night, covering everything that happens at the Oscars. I'll be back early Monday morning with my recap of all the winners, all the people who didn't win, and the memorable moments of the show. And of course, as I mentioned, later this week, I will also be bringing you my personal picks for the Academy Awards, as well as who I think would win if I were the ones to pick the Oscars, and the movies that I think could be on upset alert, the ones that could surprise people. So stay tuned for that, as well as more movie news, reviews, box office, and more. Thanks again to the sponsor for this video, Bird Dogs, but most of all, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.